All right, welcome to our very important discussion we are having this morning here under the Digger Classifieds. And today we're talking about real estate. And it's a subject that you perhaps have been trying to figure out, how can I own a home? And we have a very interesting set of panelists who will be helping us navigate our way through this. I'll be your host for this session. We'll be running it till about 12:30 p.m. and we'll be discussing matters to do with the pros and cons of buying property off-plan. And allow me to quickly introduce our guests, and we have with us this very morning, on my extreme left, we are joined by Stella Thiku, conveyance lawyer, MG Law Advocates. Thank you for joining us. We also have with us Joshua Kirui, the relationship manager, mortgage schemes at KCB. And last but not least, we have Takin Gross, who's the head of residential at Knight Frank. Hope I pronounced it right.
You have. Morning.
Morning. And one of the big questions is, what is off-plan? I'd like us to begin from that standpoint. And allow me to have the lady shoot first. Welcome.
Good morning, viewers. Thank you for that, Abby. Perhaps I should start off by saying off-plan is when the developer invests in a project that is either incomplete or project is about to start. There's groundbreaking that is not yet complete. Mm-hmm. So they put in the money in anticipation that the developer will take up the project through to completion. All right. Yes.
I know that sounds very legalese. I'd like to also hear from someone from the banking sector. What's your definition of off-plan?
Okay, my definition of off-plan would be basically a property that is not ready for occupation. Mm-hmm. So you are putting your money into a project that is not yet complete. It could be at the design stage, where you can only see artistic impressions. It could be at the groundbreaking stage. It could probably at a certain percentage of completion, maybe 50%, 20%. So we classify all that as off-plan purchases.
Amazing. And let me hear from you, Jacqueline. You are also very established in the real estate segment. And what's your understanding of off-plan?
Well, typically, if I speak primarily from Knight Frank's point of view, we would be taken on board or instructed by the developer or to sell their properties from a design. They'll present us with a brochure or some sort of CAD designs of what it might look like, and we will go to the market, present it to the buyers and say, this is what you could own. So as my panelists have said, it's a construction plan and what the property could look like without any bricks and mortar on the ground at that time.
All right. Very eloquent. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for that preamble. And I'd like to remind all that are streaming on our website, that is https realestate.digger.co.ke, that we'll be able to take your questions as well to our panelists. It's all about what you want to know and how it will shape your next steps when it comes to purchasing property off-plan. And let me take it back to our first speaker. I just want to get your opening remarks. From where you sit as a lawyer, what are the trends you're seeing? Are people buying more off-plan, or people are preferring to just stick to their traditional ways of building in their parcels of land, or the people who are buying cash? What have you been experiencing from your end?
Perhaps I would say there is a balance a bit. There's an off-take in off-plan purchases, and there's also for the completion, for those who take up properties when they're completed or they construct on their own. But perhaps off-plan has been more alluring to purchasers because it is cheaper. Most of the time the off-plan selling scheme is that the property will be cheaper than when it is complete. Mm-hmm. So most of the time you'll find clients are really lured into buying off-plan purchases because it's cheaper. They can pay in installments. Yes. They will not have the problems people have with the contractors and all those other issues. So perhaps off-plan is also is being taken up by potential purchasers very well. Perhaps now what as we have this discussion, is as they do those transactions, they need to make informed decisions.
All right.
So that is why we are here.
All right, we'll be coming to that.
Yeah.
You've almost preempted my next question. But I'd like to hear from Mr. Kirui as well. What sort of trends are you seeing? Are we seeing a market that is ready for off-plan products, or we are still holed up in our old-fashioned way of purchasing property using not so modern methods?
Okay, what I would say is that what informs a potential homeowner would be basically, more value for their money. And there's a lot of interest in off-plan because of how they are probably cheaper than completed houses. And you can see in the market right now, there's a lot of information and advertisements from people who are doing off-plan. So you'll get a lot of inquiries from potential homeowners who want to now benefit from the off-plan advantages. I am about to preempt also your next question. I think I'll stop there.
All right.
All right.
And what has been the case from your end, being a developer? Are you seeing more off-plan properties coming up, not only in Kenya, but even in East Africa?
I think we have a huge housing deficit in Kenya, and so the government is encouraging developers. They want more off-plan or new homes, new developments, which inevitably will give developers an opportunity to, create these new homes. I'm interested to hear from the mortgage colleague about how they assist developers, but also homeowners. But I think because of this drive for the housing deficit, we are seeing a huge amount more new homes being developed, off-plan effectively sales. Also, as the center or the CBD gets more congested, we're seeing developers push further afield, trying to get the property prices lower. If you're slightly further out of Nairobi, land prices are cheaper, developers can develop at a cheaper level, which then gives the public an opportunity to get in at a slightly more affordable rate. So I think what I would say in off-plan sales, I think it's the middle class has been hugely it's been a huge benefit for the middle class, and I think we're going to see that growth continue.
Interesting. And looking at data, World Bank puts our housing deficit at just about 500,000 units per annum. At the same time, the number of units being delivered to the market stand at about 200,000 units. And as we discuss this issue of off-plan, Mr. Kirui, I'd like you to walk us through. Someone is out there, they're looking to own a home, they have some savings, and it's not enough. Let's say I'm targeting a house worth 6 million shillings, and I only have savings of about $1 million bob, or I even have none, but I bank with KCB. What options are there when it comes for me to be able to get onboarded to eventually own a home that is off-plan? What are the procedures for us to get started?
Okay, the situation you've just explained is actually where the bank comes in, because as a bank what we basically do is finance you. So it means you don't have the entire money to buy the property you want. So using your scenario where you have $1 million, the house would cost 6 million, you actually have done quite a bit, because you've probably accumulated more than 10%. That's close to 20% of the purchase price. So when you come to us, we will first of all take you through what would be required. For off-plan purchases, most developers will require a commitment, and that would be a down payment anywhere between 10 to 30%. So for you to even book a property and have it reserved for you, you'd have to have that commitment. So in that case, you've already covered that. You can pay your commitment. How the bank will come in is that we can now appraise you. By appraising, it means we look at your financials. We see whether you can afford the additional 5 million by taking a loan with us. And once we are satisfied you can actually pay the balance of 5 million, we'll approve your loan. What the bank does not do is that we will not pay the developer until the project is complete. Now, there are two types of developers. The developers who probably will be okay with that, where they'll be ready for the balance to be paid upon completion. Then there are other developers who require you to pay in a staggered sort of way upon reaching certain milestones. So it will be probably after 6 months you need to pay another $1 million, after 12 months another $1 million. Now for those cases, we'll advise you to talk to the developer to accept the bank will finance at the end of the project. If they're okay with that, then we are able to finance you. Of course, we look at additional risks. We'll need you to do due diligence on the developer. It's very important to commit to a developer who has a track record. See their previous projects, were they completed on time, what is the quality of finishes, everything else. You need to do that background. And we'd advise you that if you're satisfied, because it's a risk you're taking, if you're satisfied with taking that risk, then we are able to approve your loan, give you a letter of offer, which you can present to the developer, and the developer will be satisfied. Then upon completion, we'll release the balance of the money to the developer.
All right.
Yeah.
So help me understand this better. Are you saying this is an undertaking that KCB can take up even if it's an off-plan property?
Because that is very critical. It is it's a conditional approval. Because we are not going to release any money to the developer until the project is complete. Yeah. So it's a commitment, yes, and it's also a commitment to you, because you can be satisfied that KCB will be able to finance me the balance.
Okay.
You don't want to commit to a project where you don't know the balance of the money, where it will come from. So that one you are able to do. Of course, we'll also look at the completion period. A project that hasn't gone through the groundbreaking process, it's probably going to take, if it's a big project, up to 36 months, and you'd have to be comfortable that in 36 months you'll still be able to afford this property. If it's a project that's 50%, then it's probably a year to completion. So we look at all those factors. It's a long process, so we are able to even advise you at that point.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I ask, just
Please.
on that point, I'm just interested, when the developer, most developers in Kenya want payment structures. So you'll only pay upon completion. How do you advise, buyers? Because obviously buyers will come to me and say, I love that new development, but I can't afford it. But then the developer wants payment structures. How do you work that with your client and also the developer?
Okay. Now at this point, a developer will be very key in that conversation, because as long as a developer is comfortable, you've paid them the commitment, either 10%, 20%, whatever you agree. As long as they're comfortable with the commitment from the bank, and we have a good number of them who are like that, they'll accept that commitment from the bank. However, there are developers who, as you say, want a payment structure, which is staggered. Now that may pose a bit of a challenge, because you see, at that point we can't be able to be releasing funds along the way, unless now you're able to take a loan that is not going to depend on that property as security.
All right.
In which case, then you can be able to pay the staggered payments.
Okay.
Yes. So as long as you're taking a loan that is not tied to that property as security, then that is agreeable. But if that property is going to be security, then we'd have to secure your interests and the bank's interests.
And you've touched a very important point. Thanks for that. And he said you have to secure your interests. And you are the true custodians of our interests as the legal fraternity. And for that person streaming and just wondering, why should I involve a lawyer for me to take up a property that is off-plan? What would you say to such a person?
I would say it's very important to have independent legal advisor, which comes from lawyers in the situation in Kenya, because there's need to do thorough due diligence. Thorough due diligence on the developer, on if the developer is the owner of the land, registered or beneficial. If there is another, sometimes we find that there's joint ventures, that the developer is not the owner of the land. You have to do thorough searches on the land, in the land registry, company registry. If they're individuals, the registrar of persons, to ascertain the identifications. You will do further searches on historical searches even over the developer like as he said, Kirui, the track record of the developer.
Yeah.
To ascertain they have experience, they can deliver, and they're transparent. You have to ascertain if the property is encumbered, charged. That's to say the developer, some have taken loans.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's important to ascertain that what is the status of the property, because most of the time we find clients, potential investors, lose property where the main property, let's say the whole estate was charged, the head title, and the clients, you'll find they'll lose because the bank has an overriding interest because that property was charged to a bank, the financial. So clients ought to know when they're doing their due diligence, they can get their partial, if they will get their partial discharge from the bank as per the specific units.
All right.
Yes.
Interesting. And it leads me to my next question. Of course, I'd like to hear from you, Takwin. So what are the pros? Will I save more if I buy off-plan? Will I enjoy the property earlier than my other colleagues who would want to buy when it's ready? What are the benefits really?
Sure. I think there are three sort of key benefits to off-plan purchases. First of all, it's the fact that you can secure the property on a very small deposit. Like my colleagues have said, you put 10% deposit and you can secure that property. It can take up to 2 years, 3 years for that developer to complete. If you're taking a loan and the developer's happy, you don't need to pay the rest of that money off for 3 years, which allows you to save up, which allows you to pay back the mortgage, which you're not even borrowing on at the moment because you're not going to actually take the mortgage till completion. So you have 3 years to build up. So it's a great opportunity to get onto the property ladder at an affordable rate. Furthermore, developers offer very good discounts. You can get incredible discounts on developments. And the reason for that is developers often take loans. You know, it's smart money. Borrow money to make money. They will borrow money, and so often the banks will say to developers, we want to see your track record of success. We want to see how many sales you've achieved prior to breaking ground and them actually giving the money. So often developers will want to, you know, hit an optimum level to then be able to start the development. And often that can be, you know, as much as 60%, as little as 40%, you know, it depends on each development. But that means that as a buyer, you've got a great opportunity to haggle and get a negotiable price that suits you. So getting involved in developments right at the get-go is a great opportunity. And finally, developments are new, they're fresh, they're state-of-the-art, they come with great amenities. So you can choose a development that fits your lifestyle. So in many ways, it's a great opportunity to find something that suits you and can suit your lifestyle, your family's lifestyle. So there are great advantages.
All right.
I know you'll take me to the disadvantages, but we'll stay there for now.
All right. And you've brought up something quite fundamental, that sometimes in the eyes of the buyer, they don't understand why they have to pay up a deposit. And you've really clarified it, that sometimes the developer needs to get another loan, so they'll be banking on what they've been able to sell before they can go to this next level.
It's security.
Yeah.
You know, a developer, if we sell whatever, let's say we're on Facebook and we're selling a car or whatever, you're going to want to know that that buyer is serious about buying it. The same way a developer can't give you the finished product, so can't expect you to pay the full amount. But they do want to know that you have every intention of buying that property in 3 years' time. And so with, you know, Stella, that's where Stella comes in to protect your position. And so when you give the 10%, you're also talking to your lawyer to make sure that your payment plans and you are secure that you will not lose that 10% as well.
All right. And speaking about Stella, we've seen scenarios where people can be quite crafty when it comes to these properties. Someone says, put in a deposit, you've put in a deposit, then something happens down the road. The project is unable to be completed. Something just out of the ordinary that slows down the development, and it ends up being a very nasty affair where people now have to look at options on how to square things out. And what is your advice, especially on people who like shortcuts? They say, I don't need a lawyer for this. It's just paperwork. I can sign and get on board. Just give us scenarios under which a lawyer would come in handy. We're seeing some projects have stalled literally, and people are ending up in long drawn battles in court, which they would have prevented had they engaged an independent legal mind.
Yes. Thank you. Perhaps as I was talking about due diligence, that's the sensitive part of the whole transaction.
Yeah.
And perhaps to map out how the transaction will go by the time you get to the developer, you'll approach the developer, or the marketing company will approach you. They initiate a letter of offer. Perhaps my advice to clients is usually, because when you sign the letter of offer, you have to put in a commitment fee. As he says, the developer wants to be sure that you're committing to the transaction. You must make sure that at least you have the terms of the agreement for sale,
yeah,
the sublease, all those other consequent agreements, that you have at least, you have a look at them to know what you're getting yourself into. Mm-hmm. Because when you get into a contract the moment you sign a letter of offer, it just highlights some of the clauses that are in the sale agreement. And when you get into the advanced stage of signing the sale agreement, that's after you've paid the 10%. Okay. You have to be sure that you have that the clauses are friendly to you. What are the available terms in case of breach of contract?
Yeah.
Breach of contract is when the developer fails on his part, and when you, as also the purchaser, fails to deliver your obligations.
Okay.
So you should, the parties should ensure that they have at least the draft. They have gone through the terms of the contract way before, and gone through with it with the lawyers. They're sure that what are the completion documents that they will get at the end of the transaction.
Okay.
Has the developer acquired at least some? We advise most clients, at least there must be some approvals. That includes the construction approvals from the National Construction Authority, approvals for building plans and structural plans, approvals for change of user, because sometimes if it was an agricultural land, it has to be either to be multi-dwelling, if it's for residential, if it's for office building, there has to be change of user. You have to ensure, because those are also processes that will elongate the process to acquire your property finally. Right. So due diligence is what is key from the onset, not when you've already signed the agreement. Start from when you're about to sign the letter of offer.
All right, so you've heard it from the legal experts in the room that you need to get started before you even do any paperwork. Yeah. And looking at this scenario, of course, we've already had on some of the benefits of off-plan, and from a legal standpoint, we've also seen Kenyans who want to make a quick buck, where you've bought off-plan, the property is almost complete, and you want to exit. Would you give us some advisory on this? Is it something that is happening? And what are the legal bounds when it comes to exiting an off-plan property down the road before you can actually occupy?
If I get your question right now, that's to a third successive buyer.
Yeah.
That's doable. Some of the clients buy property to let, residentials to let, others for speculation that they will sell once, because always the price will always hike up after completion. But for the third successful buyer, they must make sure that they will also get all the completion documents from the investor, the one who took up the property. Yeah.
All right.
So they'll also do the same due diligence as the initial purchaser did. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. And just before we go to Kirui, one of the questions that a majority of people are asking, how costly is it to get a lawyer? And do these fees really add up? Are they practical? Because it's one of the reasons why some avoid going that route.
Well, of course, we may not discuss the exact terms, but we are guided by the law. There is an advocate remuneration order. Nevertheless, my advice to potential buyers, it's better to put in the money. It's less than you, when you put in your 14 million for the off-plan purchase, well, it would cost you maybe 200,000 to pay an advocate. It's better to put in the 200 initially to protect your interest throughout than lose the 14 million or the entire property.
All right.
Yes.
Interesting. And Mr. Kirui, just persuade me. I'm torn between off-plan or ready units. And as a banker, what would you go for as a person? Let me put you on the spot a bit.
Okay. How do I do this? Everything else being constant.
Yeah.
Going for an off-plan, you get value for your money. And not only do you get value for your money, as I said, you get a new product, a new house. You see, you can even control what finishes are put into that unit, such that by the time it's going towards the finishing stage, you want different sorts of finishes. You can easily talk with the developer. It can cost you a bit more,
all right,
but you get what you want.
I get it. Just hold your thought, because I can see he's smiling as you speak, because I'd also want to hear from you, just before you finish you exhaust your point. You've given us some benefits of off-plan, and I'd like to know, if it was boiling down to you, what would you pick?
It's horses for courses. I think off-plan also is an investment vehicle for investors. So buy-to-let investors, or also, you know, because an off-plan property can take 2 to 3 years.
Yeah.
A lot of sellers, a lot of buyers will look at the capital appreciation. So they buy at the beginning in the hope that they can recuperate, or, you know, some developments can go up by 100% on exit, but it comes back to the law. You know, your lawyer has to protect you in every avenue, because there are so many challenges, so many things can go wrong along the process. And ultimately, you could put down 10, 20%, and then in 3 years' time, developer doesn't complete and you lose all the money. And you've lost 3 years of savings, et cetera, et cetera. So I think there's pros to off-plan, and there's pros to, you know, buying something you can already see. You buy something that's ready to go, you see what it is, you know exactly what it entails, where it is, et cetera, you can see what finishes are done, but you're probably paying a premium for that product as well, because when you buy something that is completed and is basically, you know, turnkey we mean you can live in it straight away, then you're going to have to pay a premium for it. So I think there's no right or wrong. All I could say is you really need to understand, and what my team does is we really understand what the requirements are for a particular buyer. Are you an investor? Are you a homeowner? What are your needs? And then we try and match you with what's right for your needs.
Kirui will be coming to you. We had some challenge with your microphone, but it's being sorted out. And I'd like to hear your thoughts as well. As a person, yes, you've given now a professional standpoint, but when it goes down to the wire, what will you pick?
For me, as an individual, I think it all runs down to my needs. And if I'm looking for home ownership, which is soon, considering my experience with off-plan, it's not so quick to have, as you said, a turnkey. It's not easy to get it so soon as expected. So perhaps for speculation, buy to let, I would definitely consider the off-plan purchase. For home ownership that is quick, I would also, I think I would fall more on the completion, because that would make you have informed decisions. Yeah, because from professional point of view, you'll find that the completion dates for off-plan purchases, you are really not able to have clear-cut completion, especially with the developers.
All right.
Yes.
And Mr. Kirui, just picking off from where we left it, you were giving your point in terms of off-plan being a more viable option. And looking at the way the society is evolving, there's a big push towards people taking up off-plan, and people are lining up. When you see road shows, when you see experiential visits, there's genuinely a hunger in the market when it comes to off-plan properties. And are we able to meet the demand? And as we look at the big picture, what needs to happen from a banking point of view, especially when it comes to deepening uptake?
You've actually rightly pointed out there's a lot of drive towards off-plan, and the drive is mostly from developers. So you find out there you'll get so many brochures, so many people advertising properties, but that's where the risk lies, because not many of these developers are able to deliver. So that's why at the end of it, you're taking a risk. You have to face it. When you're doing off-plan, you're taking a risk. It's not a small risk. So where now Stella will come in, due diligence, you just have to do your due diligence. Because yes, there's a big benefit for getting off-plan, but there's so many developers out there, I can tell you, there are quite a good number who don't even get to break point. They don't get to break the ground.
Yeah.
Because they are probably looking for funds to construct. So they'll come up with very nice brochures, very nice artistic impressions, and you'll actually be taken in by what they're presenting to you. But at the end of the day, they're looking for funds to put into the construction. So you also need to know their financing plan. Are they able to do the construction without depending on the funds from you? Because at that point, if you commit your money, then you're going to lose your money. So due diligence is the key thing you need to do before you commit.
All right.
Now, from the bank's perspective, that's why as a bank, we will not even release money until the project is complete. Now, what will be exposed is your deposit, the amount you've put in. So that exposure is what you need to take care of.
All right.
From the financials perspective, and what you also need to look at is, are you going to be able to service this loan when it comes to time for you to now pay the loan? That's why you also need to take take a look at your financials. We appraise you, and then you also need to look at the time factor, because, for example, if they're breaking ground today and it will take 36 months, which is a long time for completion, what will happen? If you are in employment, probably they are what we call self-employment. You work for the government, you work for a specific industry, then you can be almost confident. If you're in business, then you need to look at your business, because as she also said, there's another risk. The biggest risk is usually non-completion by the developer, but there's another risk of you not meeting your part of the bargain. And in this case, the clause is probably in the agreement which you should look at. What happens if you are not able to meet your bargain? Are you able to transfer this property, for example, to me, and I pay the amount that you wanted?
Yeah.
Some developers don't want that, because if I'm selling to you the house now at 5 million, 3 years down the line when I'm completing, I'll be selling to others at 10 million. So I don't want you to benefit by transferring to someone else, because you'll transfer to them at a higher cost.
Yeah.
So developers will have, some developers will have a clause that restricts you to transfer to someone else. It will have to go back to the developer.
Is that true?
And most of the time, as I said, most of the time you'll find the developers and their lawyers, they have take it or leave it contracts.
Okay.
So most of the time the investor feels they are constrained, they don't have much, but you can always negotiate. But the higher bargaining power, of course, lies with the developer.
The developer.
But because of the take it or leave it type of contracts that they have, sometimes that's the informed decision. As you make your decision, those are some of the things that you need to be aware, because most of the time the developers will not allow amendment of such clauses. Because as I say, they are looking at it like you're making profits. You are looking to make profits.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree and disagree. From a real estate point of view, I think developers they look at the bigger picture.
Yeah.
They're looking at the full sale of the entire development. They need exit. So from breaking ground to selling, they want to do it in 2 years. So I agree that developers probably don't like the idea that you're making a profit, but at the same time, they've done their numbers, and they'll have a minimum number that they would have wanted to achieve. And obviously, if someone's trying to sell at 10 million, they might try and sell at 7 million, which is 2 million better where they started, but they're still doing well. If people are buying and now selling, have bought from them and selling at 10 million. The developer's going, well, if I've still got 20 units to sell, I'm cheaper than the market, I can get out. So I think it comes down to the accountability, transparency, professionalism of the developer. If a developer is trying to stop you selling, then there's probably something more untoward that you've missed or that the lawyer would need to look into.
Okay.
But most developers are, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, feel free to weigh in.
Yeah, I agree. Some of the developers look at it in that term. It's called the assignment clause, that if you can assign your right to another party, but from the developer's perspective is they don't want to keep on, you know, by the time you're getting to signing papers, you have exchanged a lot of documentation, there's a lot of paperwork, perhaps there's an advanced stage of registration, and then coming back for another buyer. So they opt to finish with you, then you can finish with the other party later.
All right, because it has a cost implication.
Yes, there are very many cost implications.
All right. And Mr. Kirui, looking at the mortgage business and off-plan properties, what would be your advice, especially on the tips you can give our viewers this morning, especially on, probably I'm 50 years old and I want to buy an off-land property with a mortgage, and I'm retiring in another, say, 10 years or 5 years' time. What's your advice to that young, sporty man who has just gotten a job, earning a 6-figure salary? They want to take up a mortgage, and what products are there in the market at the same time? What are the things you should look out for when you're looking to sign up for a mortgage that is very accommodative for your age?
Okay, there are two angles to it. A younger person is more flexible in terms of the number of years they can take a mortgage. We give up to 25 years repayment period. So if you are retiring at 60 and you are 30, then you can pay for 25 years. Of course, the other reality is that younger people have less income, so they're also limited in the kind of property they get. But it's good to start early, such that you are able to make, and when you're early, you have time. You can decide that I'm taking a year, I'm taking 2 years to plan myself. She said that closing costs, there'll be legal fees, there'll be stamp duty. You'll need around 10% of the probably purchase price to meet the closing costs. So if you're buying a house of 10 million, you need to have $1 million, for example.
You've touched on so many things that are very important. Just walk us through. What are those, the 10% I've heard you say, the stamp duty? I would like to capture that.
All right, so when you're buying a mortgage, unlike the other loans that we usually take, what we call consumer loans, that you just go to the bank, make an application for $1 million, and you're given $1 million and you go away. For a mortgage, there will be other additional costs, and these are not costs to the bank. They'll go to KRA, that is stamp duty. Stella here will charge you for legal fees for the transfer. You know, so there'll be valuation, there'll be insurance if you're taking a mortgage. So there is usually stamp duty at 4% of the property value generally. So that one has to come out of your pocket and it goes to KRA. So you need to be aware of these costs. And when you come to the bank, we usually tell you, you need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 costs for you to be able to complete a mortgage. Because if you don't have that money, the process will stagnate. And when it stagnates, you're losing, you know. So generally, as a good feel, take around 10% of your project, of the house you want to purchase. Take around 10%. And that will inform how much you need on the side if you're taking a mortgage of 100%. If you're taking a mortgage of 90%, for example, then you need a down payment also. You know, so at that point, it's good to see a banker and we'll be able to advise you what you need, how much you need to raise. And she will tell you, even for most of this off-plan, when you sign the sale agreement, they usually have listed the costs, most of them. They'll have listed all the costs and you're going to pay to the developer actually. For most of them, you pay the developer and they're the ones who meet those costs. So it is very, very important. That's one of the key things you need to know, that apart from the purchase price, which you may have planned, because people will come having a good plan of how I'll raise the 10 million, but they will not have factored in the closing costs. So that one we advise you and we'll let you know the amount you need to take.
And as a developer, you have come at the forefront of being a key pillar for people to either take up off-plan or not. As developers, what are some of the checkboxes that I need to tick in case I'm purchasing an off-plan property? And have we seen flexibility, especially in the payment structures?
So, so I'm a real estate company. I help developers sell their products.
Yeah.
So I don't unlike Stella and Joshua, who would charge the buyer for their fees, we charge the seller. So the developer is our client, but saying that, we are trying to work with the buyers to make sure that they're protected as well. In terms of when buyers are coming to look at developments, or what Knight Frank Kenya, if I'm totally honest, it's a market off-plan sales that at Knight Frank we are looking into in more detail and getting more involved in. But we're also very careful about what we get involved with, because there are so many reservations we have, mainly developments not being completed, finishings not being to the standard that the buyers were expecting. Service charge is a fee that is put on a property to pay for the amenities, the security, the communal costs that might be involved. Yeah. They can be over exaggerated. So when you get involved, they'll sell you service charges X, and then when you've completed, it's actually a lot more. And it's almost like, a lot of people buy so they don't have to rent, but then what you thought you were saving, you're almost paying on service charges. So there's a lot of things that are worrying, and what we try to do and what we encourage buyers, what we try and do for buyers, so when a buyer comes to us, if I'm selling a development, I've done most of the checks for them, but the key ones that we'll look at is the accountability and transparency of the developer. If a developer is willing to open their books and show the funding and how they intend to complete the project, it should reassure a buyer. Someone who's open and honest is reassuring. Their professionalism, and their past records. Have they done developments in the past? Have they completed those developments? Are they still involved? What is their professional track record? And also, and then furthermore, what is their time scales? What on their previous projects, what did they stick to their time scales? Did they not? So I think what we try to do at Knight Frank is to look into all that for a buyer. So when they come to Knight Frank, they're reassured that we've done those checks. But if you're not with Knight Frank and you're looking at a developer privately, you must do those checks. You must check all those things before you put any money down. And
all right.
Yeah, and a lawyer can either help with that, or you must do it yourselves, because a lawyer also will look into that, but is more looking at the title and the legalities of the project. But you as a consumer should be looking at the ability of the developer to complete and what their track record is.
All right. Yeah, please chip in.
I can chip in. He made a point very clear that there are marketers most of the time for the developers. Sometimes clients will have them, the investors ought to know by the time a marketing agent is coming to you, who are you getting into a contract with? Is it the developer? Is it the agency? And even as you do your due diligence, it's important to do your due diligence on the agency or the marketer, if that's right. So because I'm sure they have they are concerned about their reputational risk. So Knight Frank is big. It can't, it cannot take up projects that they know will be incomplete, because it will affect their other projects and everything. So even as you do your due diligence, be aware that most times there is a marketing company, there is the actual developer.
All right. Okay. And ladies and gentlemen, I'd like us to shift gears and now look at the cons. We've looked at majorly the pros of off-plan purchases, and I'm getting quite a host of questions from our online viewers here asking, What are some of the cons when it comes to off-plan property from a legal standpoint? Would you like to go first?
Yes, I don't mind.
Yeah.
So perhaps I would go in illegal terms is the completion period. Most of the time you'll find what is on paper is not what translates to what is on the ground. So most of the off-plan purchases you have to allow, as an investor, you should give yourself room for the project may take longer for reasons even beyond control for the developer. The second thing...
So those are red flags people should watch out for.
Yes,
Yeah.
or rather they should be aware that some can be by the cost of the developer, others maybe some approvals are taking long, the financing, if they're waiting for more uptick to finance their projects.
Yeah. So if I got you clearly, are you saying that as I get on board to buy an off-plan property and we realize down the line that the project has stalled or is delaying, should I be worried? How should I handle it? Because at the end of the day, I want to own my property. I don't care what the developer has gotten into.
Yeah.
But how do you advise someone to navigate their way through this?
One, I advise my clients, or we make professional advice. I give you professional advice as per what is on the fine print, but also as an investor, ensure that you also do physical checkups on the milestones accomplished by the developer as discussed on contract. If they said by these 6 months we have done this, we have the foundation laid and everything, is it done? That can only be confirmed if you go there physically. Most of the time we advise clients, if you do your physical visit and there is any problem and you need to put up a notice, you come now back to the advocate. The advocate will help you put it in writing so that there is a record in case of any future disengagement.
Okay.
Yes.
You know, I might add,
Yeah.
it's that accountability and transparency. If the developer, look, we've just been through COVID. There are a number of developments that have stalled or aren't progressing. They might have been secured, they might have had secured buyers, but buyers' circumstances have changed, they can't complete. So we're in a market at the moment where there are developers that have stalled that is no reason to themselves.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes the construction companies, you know, a developer plans the development, they'll then instruct a construction company to build it. They sometimes fight, they sometimes fall out. So there's a lot of things that are out of any individual's control, but it's a case of understanding why that happened and how it happened. And if a developer is open and honest, you'll feel more reassured and you might then progress. But I think with what Stella said, I would always encourage my buyers to have an independent lawyer to protect their interests. There are developments where a developer will make the buyer use their lawyer. It's kind of written into the sale price. You can negotiate that. But then I would also have your own lawyer just look over everything, have protection. So if the development isn't going to plan, or it's taking a lot longer, or you've gone past the sunset period. The sunset period is when it's planned to have been completed, and it's gone on and on, even though it's no control, but you need to get out, then your lawyer will have protected that 10% deposit. Or at that stage, you might be 80% complete, you might have paid 80% of the money. So in many ways, you know, you want to protect that money. And the lawyers would help with that.
All right. Just a follow-up question to that. How long is too long to wait? Because some projects might end up being ongoing in perpetuity, and it puts the investor in a very awkward position.
I'll take that up. As he said, most of the time you'll find the developer wants the potential buyer to also use the advocate. Ensure that you'll have your independent advocate. Much as it would cost you more, as you said, it's better putting in the money now than later when it will cost you more. Because most of the time the clauses on completion will be after 6 months after practical completion, which is open-ended. There must be clear-cut completion lines and completion dates where time is of essence to say that at the foremost maybe 2 years because if you do not, most of the time, that's how potential investors end up losing, even when things go sour and they have to go to court. There was no completion timeline, so that is a defense to the developer, because I did not give you. So make sure that at least there is a timeline. It may be varied because according to contract, both parties can come and agree, we are not able to complete this project within this 2 years or within these 6 months. Kindly, can we add add one more year, and these are the consequences if that is not accomplished.
Okay, and just as you respond,
but it can be out of your control how long you wait. Because if you've put the money in and developers use the money to build, they can't pay you the money back. So now where do your lawyer can take up take it to court, for example. But if the developer is bankrupt,
so does this leave room for someone to have a stake in that property, because the developer is not liquid anymore? They've spent the money in construction. You as the investor, KCB has given me the mortgage. I cannot access them. I cannot get a refund. So what happens? As you ponder over it, let's hear from Kirui.
I think now that's where you need to know that these are eventualities that may happen. That's why it's higher risk committing to an off-plan. So you'll have taken the risk. And as she said, it could be a developer's problem. It could be something beyond the developers. So those are now the risks that you need to know when you are going into that project. Because there are so many projects right now out there which are stalled, others for 5 years. And as you said, you may not practically be able to get your money back. You'll be in legal battles for 10 years or so, and you won't get your money back because even the developer is not liquid.
Yeah.
So those are the risks you need to take. But I want to add, apart from the risk of non-completion, which is actually the highest anyway, you also need to understand the product you expect. Most people will see very nice brochures. Sometimes you even see 3D impressions of the kind of house you're going to see.
There are so many in this town.
Now what happens is that by the time it gets to completion, you go to the house and you are totally, shocked at what you see. And I've seen this quite a good number of times. And that's why what she said about you visiting the property is very important. Be sure to be visiting the property at those stages of construction. And understand dimensions. If you're buying a unit that is said to be 95 square meters, if they have a show house on site, well and good, that's easy to tell. You can go and see the size and all that. If it's they've not broken ground, try to find similar properties with similar dimensions, so that at least at the back of your mind you understand what you expect. And then even as a bank, sometimes we get into problems. Stella has bought an off-plan. The developer said it's complete. Stella has done the other Stella with the lawyer has done the transfer and charge, and now they're demanding payments. And then you visit the site, you see, defects. So at that point, if you are not visiting the site and you didn't see these defects, now you'll have a lot of problems with the developer. Usually do a snag list, which is basically the list of defects to be fixed. And as maybe Stella would jump in on that, I don't know, is there a clause that if there are defects in this property, they need to be fixed before you release the money? So there are those things you need to look at. What do you expect? What is the end product you expect? Because at that point, you don't know how it looks like. So you better know what the dimensions, the finishes, so that you're not disenchanted at the end of the day.
Yeah, and tied to that, as you wait to respond, there's an example I have in mind of a property that was being developed in Athi River. And as the property was ongoing, it became apparent that when it rained, the houses used to flood. And the developer had to go back to the drawing board and do a couple of adjustments, which impacted on the overall cost. But like you said, the would-be occupants had visited and realized there's this challenge that every time it rains, the houses on the ground floor, most of them would flood. And this was rectified. But let me hear your thoughts on this. What options are there if I've bought off plan, I've visited, I realized that there's a crack in my kitchen wall? What happens?
What happens is, as I would like to answer, everything boils down to the fine print. Because in that case, you would ensure that as you sign the contract, there is a defects liability period. which we advise minimum 6 months when you can gauge on those snags in the houses when you get there. So minimum 6 months, and most times that's what developers will agree to, that once there is occupation, there is a certificate of occupation, and you're allowed to possess the house, there's 6 months defects liability period. And perhaps to also answer a question he had asked on that sometimes it's beyond the developer. Essentially, as we said, make sure whatever you're signing, you are sure of what you're signing, because whatever the flyer shows, those 3D shows, can they be tied down to the agreement? If there's a swimming pool, ensure it's expressly stated in the sale of agreement, so that, because that is the superior agreement that you can rely on in case of any eventualities. If it's in case of COVID, that's force majeure. Does your agreement cover for that? Those are some of the things, and that's why you will find most of the times clients are just willing to sign something off, and they say, oh, they don't want to read a sale agreement that is so bulky. But those are some of the fine prints that will be of help in case there's an eventuality.
So the cross-cutting theme from what I'm gathering is that if I'm buying off-plan, the biggest risk is non-completion. The rest are just details that you can always iron out. And clearly, I'm quite persuaded that off-plan is the way to go. And we're getting a host of questions here from various persons out there. Someone is asking, is Knight Frank in the business of off-plan? And are they also considering to go towards the counties?
We've recently taken on a few new off-plan developments, or in fact, many of the ones that we do take on are very close to completion, because we can see the tangible asset and we have the security. So in many cases, we are sort of doing off-plan sales, but there is sort of something to see, so you can kind of see the development. Sometimes there's no internal works. Sometimes they have done all the internal work, so you can kind of see a show home. We try mainly to look at things that do have a show home, so you can get a feel for what the end product would look like. In terms of the counties, you've talked about the housing deficit. Nairobi is limited on space. The cost of a brownfield site in Nairobi is huge. And so developers are moving further afield. So as we go more into this field of off-plan, of course we will move out with it. At the moment, mainly we're around, we've got a new development that we've just taken on in Garden City. We're looking at developments in Tartu. We're looking at developments in Kilimani. So mainly sort of Nairobi based, but also Mombasa. And funnily enough, also Kilifi as well, as an area that we're seeing quite big growth as well. So yes, we are in the industry. It's probably something that you'll see growth at Knight Frank over the next couple of years, and also you'll see growth outside of Nairobi as we take on these developments.
A question here to KCB. Do you have the minimum and the maximum mortgage amounts for off-plan? We'll be happy if you can clarify on this.
No, we don't have minimum and maximum amounts. The amount you can afford is what you'll take. If you want a loan of 50 million, as long as your income is able to afford it, fine. 5 million, what really restricts you is the ability to pay. As long as you have income to service that amount, then you're able to take a mortgage.
But the loan to value, 10%, 10% deposit, 90% borrowing, or
yes,
like
we have
do that?
We have different arrangements ranging from 100% to 90%. So depending on you, the kind of industry you're in, the kind of income you have, then you can get even up to 100%.
All right, thanks for that clarification. A question here to our lawyer in the house. Someone is asking, please advise more on the approvals. If you could just recap on that. Yeah. What key approvals should you be looking out for when you're taking up off-plan?
So for
if you can give us a summary.
A summary?
Yeah.
I'll take one that you had mentioned in Athi River. Some of them, you have to have NEMA approvals, the National Environment Management Authority. Yeah. Because of such instances of flooding and all that, there must be NEMA approvals. there must be occupational certificates from even practical occupational certificate from the architect, structural building plans approved building plans, structural plans, which will give you confidence that the building that is going to be constructed is of sound integrity. There is also NLC, the National Land Commission, because we have seen, unfortunately, some unscrupulous developers who will take up public land. So those are, and goes in hand with the Ndongo report.
Yeah.
Can do your searches there. There's also the approvals on change of user. Is the developer, have they been allowed to do the multi-dwelling, the residential? Is it in proper records? And what are the conditions that accompany that leasehold? Yeah.
All right.
Yes.
And as we come to the tail end of our very heartful discussion, I'd like to just pick your closing thoughts, especially we've heard from both sides of the coin around off-plan. I'd like you to give us your parting shot, really, to that viewer who is convinced that they want to take up this opportunity. What would be your closing thoughts, especially when it comes to the journey that you have to go through before you own your off-plan home, and why is it so imperative for you to have a legal shoulder to lean on?
Perhaps I would like to tell the potential investors that there are success stories in off-plan, much as there are those who disappoint the investors. But of most importance is ensure that you do your due diligence. You're aware of what you're getting yourself into, so as to make an informed decision, because it's not maybe the right decision, but an informed decision on the risk that you're about to take. And also maybe perhaps to alert the clients, there's no particular legislation that governs off-plan. So that's why sometimes it's open-ended. The developers take advantage of potential investors. But if you make sure that your transaction goes on well, your documentation is well understood, and you are ready to take up the risk, then go ahead.
Awesome.
Yes.
And to Mr. Moneybags, the mortgage lenders,
Yeah.
what would be your closing thoughts on this very, very heated subject on off-plan versus ready-made?
Okay. The off-plan purchases, as we've said severally, is based on your risk appetite. But even as you take the risk, make sure it's a calculated risk. Do your background checks. That is very, very key. Know the developer. Selling agents like Knight Frank, they're probably not going to even touch some developers. So do your background checks. Be a bit thorough, because you don't want to lose money. But at the end of the day, if you are able to cover those risks, you're going to get value for your money. Do your financial planning. Know how much you're going to pay the balance, because some people will get excited. I only need to pay 10% now. Know your financial plan. How will I be able to pay the difference? Come to us as a bank. We do your financial calculations. We see how you're going to meet the difference, so that you've taken care of the risk of the developer side.
Yeah.
Look at your own side also. How are you going to pay the balance, so that you don't get into cases where you had a good deal, then you're now unable to benefit from it.
All right, very pertinent subject there. And the man of the moment, as you wrap it up, what would be your parting shot really to our viewers?
With all my buyers, I always say, if something looks too good to be true, it usually is. And so trust professionals, trust your own instincts. You know, just because something looks really good value, it isn't always saying the full picture. I think, you know, really, if you look at a developer's credibility and everything, and you look at the full picture, you'll get a very good sense of whether it's going to be, it will progress and the whole project will go smoothly. I believe that on Digger Classifieds, on your real estate section, we've given a full list of some of our properties that might meet our viewers. So if there's anything that takes anyone's interest, please get in touch. I've got a team of highly qualified professionals who would be more than happy to discuss those listings, but also give advice on other listings as well. So we're always available, more than happy to help in any way we can, and just advise as and when people might need it.
Excellent. Well, we are soon coming to the tail end of this very robust discussion around off-plan versus ready-made units. And we thank you for your various comments coming in saying very solid panelists. We need to have this session again, very informative. Thank you for your feedback. We also have another feedback here saying that we need to take a look at opportunities in the counties. Nairobi is oversaturated. Thanks for that. I'm sure our panelists will take these messages back to their other executives as well. And we're also seeing some good feedback here. Someone saying very clear stream, keep it up, Digger Classifieds, and we hope to get on board as well. Thank you. And at this juncture, it's been a pleasure moderating for you this session. I hope you've learned a thing or two. If not, make sure you always catch up with our discussions here at the Digger Classifieds, where we are your e-commerce platform when it comes to getting access to all kinds of properties, from real estate to motoring, name it. We all got it covered for you here on Digger Classifieds. And just to thank my panelists, we were this very day delighted to be having Takin Gross, Head of Residential at Knight Frank. Thank you, sir, for making time. We were also delighted to have with us Joshua Kirui, the Relationship Manager, Mortgage Schemes at KCB. Thank you. And last but not least, Stella Thuku, who kept us glued with her legal advice. Thank you so much, Stella, conveyance lawyer at MG Law Advocates, for just giving us your time and your great insights into this very, very important subject. And I've been your host. My name is Abi Agina. Let's keep the conversation going on Standard Digital. We are still going to be taking in your feedback. Send your questions, and remember to point out your questions directly to any of the panelists from MG Law Advocates, Knight Frank, KCB. Feel free to tag them on your questions, and we'll be happy to respond to them as we progress. Well, that brings us to the end, and many thanks, and thank you once again for your valid company. Until next time, bye-bye for now. My name is Abi Agina. Keep it locked here on Digger Classified.